Welcome. Welcome to the WWF press conference. We observed the negotiation has been intensified. We also know the ministers has arrived. So we are at a critical moment of the negotiating of a global biodiversity framework that we hope will bring the nature positive future for us. So today we as WWF have a panel here to share what is the state of play and what we think the ministers can do when they are here. So I am Lin Li, the Senior Director of Global Policy Advocacy at WWF International. To my left is Director General of WWF International, Mr. Marco Lampertini. And to my right is Alice Rueza, the Regional Director of Africa for WWF International. And to the further right is Mr. Guido Broekhoven, Head of Policy Research and Development of WWF International. Now I'd like to turn the floor to Marco to share his thought, please.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I don't think I can use any other different expression to define where we are today, apart from saying that we are stuck. And we are stuck on two fronts. On one hand, countries are failing to step up and to provide the urgently needed finance to support efforts for conservation of biodiversity globally. And on the other hand, we are also witnessing how some negotiators are continuing to dilute the ambition of the draft Global Biodiversity Framework. This is something that we have witnessed from the very beginning of the negotiations. Ambition has gone down, not up, as we reach COP15. That has to change. That has to change on both fronts. We need more resources for biodiversity, that's a fact. We need more resources from biodiversity flowing particularly to the global south, that's another fact. And we need that both ambition and the commensurate mobilization of resources are recognized as essential to deliver a global biodiversity framework which is fit for purpose in addressing the biodiversity crisis. Biodiversity crisis, I don't need to tell you, that in return affects our food security, water security, health, and social cohesion ultimately. Ambition is being diluted across the board of the Global Biodiversity Framework. We are seeing ambition diluted on habitats conservation, species conservation, means of implementations. That cannot be the outcome of COP15, when we all hope that COP15 will be remembered as the watershed agreement that scale up, speed up our commitment and action to reverse biodiversity loss. 12 years ago, the world committed towards extinction by species by 2020. We failed. We can't fail again. First of all, let me go through a few of the key elements that we believe needs to be strengthened or maintained in the current GBF draft. The first one is the mission. The mission is such an important dimension of the global biodiversity framework. Is setting the direction, is setting the North Star, the Southern Cross, the compass for the whole of society to deliver it. And the mission has as a minimum, as an absolute minimum, to contain the halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030 to build a nature positive future. Future with more nature, not less, for the benefit of everybody, to fulfill our moral duty to coexist to the rest of life on the earth and to support humanity towards a sustainable and safe future, particularly the most vulnerable populations that are affected today and will be affected the most by biodiversity loss as much as climate change. And we know that this is also critical, halt and restore nature loss, to keep the 1.5 degrees target alive. On spatial conservation, on area-based conservation, the science is very clear. We have lost so much, almost half of the forest, half of the coral reefs, 80% of wetlands, 1 million species are being extinctions due to habitat loss mainly. We need to reverse that by protecting more of the nature that is left of the planet. Science is talking about a minimum target of 30%, which means doubling the current protection on land, tripling the current protection in the ocean. How we do it? Empowering local leadership, indigenous communities, local communities, and also choosing the right places to protect, particularly focusing on intact nature that provides huge services to the balance of the planet and to our own society and economy today, is a target that needs to be clearly remaining in the global biodiversity framework. But 30% cannot deliver the whole turn reverse by 2030 nature positive mission alone. We also need to sustainably manage the other 70%, where today large industrial unsustainable practices are driving biodiversity loss and even putting under pressure the current existing protected area system, and will be the same for the 30% in future. In that sense, we need to have a very specific reference to the need to reduce the ecological footprint of our current broken development model, a development model that fails the planet as well as people, particularly the most vulnerable population in developing economies. And that needs to be highlighting a number of elements that at the moment are not highlighting strongly enough. There is even a challenge to the reference of, for example, pesticides in the text. And of course, that's nonsensical considering the impact this particular agricultural practice is having on biodiversity worldwide, and by the way, on human health as well. There is not enough focus on agroecology, loss and waste of food, which is huge today. It is undermining food security. And of course, to the shift to sustainable diets, which the UN Food System Summit last year has highlighted as key elements to deliver sustainable, safe, and ecologically balanced food systems. The issue that we're facing today is that we have left ministers, negotiators have left ministers with a mountain to climb in the next couple of days. We confide on the wisdom of the leadership of the world not to miss this opportunity to set our society and our economy on a course towards a nature-positive future. Let me also spend 2 words, and Alice will go deeper on this, on the resource mobilization. We really need this issue to be tackled by everyone in the room. We need all countries to commit to mobilize more resources for biodiversity, particularly international flows to the global south, as I said earlier, but also at country level using domestic budgets. We need to also look at all sources. ODA is one key dimension, but there are many other dimensions that could generate significant resources for biodiversity, including private sector funding and other mechanisms. And we need to also clearly support the idea of developing national biodiversity finance plan alongside the National Biodiversity Action Plan in order to ensure resourcing of those actions, because that's an issue that clearly led to the failure in the previous decade up to 2020. So on one hand, just to conclude, we are very concerned about the state of play, where countries are pointing fingers at each other. Here we need countries to come together. We need nature to bring us together and deliver what is needed, what is necessary, not just try to agree on a lowest common denominator was politically negotiable in the current geopolitical environment. This is too important to fail. COP15 is a must deliver in terms of an ambitious global biodiversity framework. And we hope, and we're doing our best to make that happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco. Now we need ambition on mission, on conserving, protecting, on sustainable manage, on reducing the footprint, and also on resource mobilization. Now I move to Alice to really share what we are calling on the resource mobilization ambition. Please, Alice.
Thank you, Lynn and Marco. We are very concerned that the governments are not yet able to find common ground on the necessary resources to tackle our devastating nature crisis and support action on the ground. So despite welcome commitments in the lead-in, we are not seeing countries stepping up to supply the necessary finance, while others are looking to prioritizing short-term interests over the health of our planet. Our survival as humanity is currently being held hostage by all. Countries on the front line of the nature crisis cannot afford failure in Montreal. Valuing nature is critical to many countries' balance sheets to reduce liabilities and increase assets. For example, in Africa, around 70% of our population is dependent on nature for our livelihoods, and 50% of wealth in most African countries is based on natural capital and assets. This is our livelihoods, it is our health, this is the communities already exposed to the impacts of climate change. So our people and planet don't need action now, they needed it yesterday. We will not be able to achieve our goals and targets without all countries committing to comprehensive resource mobilization from all sources, commensurate with the size of the biodiversity finance gap, which is in the billions of dollars. Developing countries must be key beneficiaries of increased international biodiversity finance. That means one, more and additional resources from developed countries, and any instrument that allows that, ensuring easy access by developing countries. Ultimately, all governments need to invest more in nature. Two, we need to align financial flows so we stop investing in the destruction of nature and start incentivizing the protection of nature. Three, we need to repurpose the hundreds and billions of subsidies so they stop harming but keep positive societal benefits. And four, we need regulations for the private sector to align to a nature-positive direction. Let me finish by saying this. Ambitious goals and targets are only meaningful if they guide and stimulate ambitious action. The agreement must include a strong implementation mechanism that holds parties accountable. This means countries committing to review progress and increase action when targets aren't being met. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alice. So we know goals and targets need resources to support and also need a strong implementation mechanism. This is not a one versus the other. We are all in this together. What is the state of play? We need this, but what is going on now? So let's hear from Guido. What is the state of play at this moment?
Thank you, Lynn. I just want to add a few points to what Marco and Alice have been explaining. One issue is that we are hearing a lot about is numbers. There's increased talk about various numbers, in particular relation to resource mobilization. However, I'd like to highlight that numbers are also important for the other goals and targets in the framework. Particularly at the goal level, we still have no assurances that there will be outcomes for 2030 defined. There is still a discussion about whether goals should be only aspirational for 2050 or whether they will actually help us to measure where we want to be by 2030. That issue needs to be resolved quickly, and these numbers need to be there so that we can actually learn from the Aichi lessons where the goals and targets were not measurable, so that you can't really take stock during implementation of where you collectively are as the parties. So really we need to see those numbers agreed as soon as possible. I just want to also highlight and emphasize the importance of a real strong goal B on sustainable use and on addressing the drivers of biodiversity loss through a reference to reducing the ecological footprint of our production and consumption. We need to move towards sustainable use so that nature can continue to provide the goods and services we rely on, and that also the biodiversity outside protected and conserved areas will continue to thrive. And The business sector plays an important role there, and there is a target, target 15, on the role of businesses. And really that target needs to provide businesses, through policy and regulations put in place by governments, for businesses to follow mandatory disclosure of their impacts and their risks related to the use of nature. But really it also needs to make sure that businesses redirect their actions from having negative impacts to having positive impacts. There needs to be a strong direction given to businesses to move away from these biodiversity negative activities. Also, target 16 related to consumption is important to underpin a strong goal on footprint reduction by working on reducing the global overconsumption. It's important that the huge inequalities globally of consumption levels is recognized, but the overall global consumption patterns need to be brought back within planetary boundaries. So really, the measure of success for the GBF is the entire package. It is ambition on conservation, ambition on addressing the drivers, also implementation. If there's one lesson from the Aichi targets and the fact that they have not been achieved, it is that implementation mechanism was not strong enough. We need to really make sure that there is a process in place that parties agree to regularly review where they are in the implementation, and then to ratchet up action on the ground to make sure that they stay on track to achieve the goals and targets that they have committed themselves to. And then finally, the comprehensive resource mobilization package. Thank you.
Thank you, Guido. We know what we need. We need the ambition we need, but we also see a lot of key elements at this moment at the risk of not being able to taken up by the GBF. So the ministers are here. We're really calling ministers and working together to really ensure the ambition and ensure the outcome of GBF. Thanks for our panels here. Now I'd like to open the floor to the floor. I'd like to encourage the journalists in the room to put up your hands, and we will take about 2 questions at a time, so we can answer that. Please do say who you are and then your question. I saw a hand here, please.
Testing.
Hi there, Kate Allen from the Toronto Star. I'm wondering if you can speak to language around Indigenous rights in the potential 30 by 30 target and the status of that.
Thank you. Okay. I don't see other question yet. I have one question. This gentleman here. Next round, please. The gentleman there.
My name is John Muchangi from the Star newspaper in Kenya and from Earth Journalism Network. So my question is, WWF in support of a new fund or increasing financing within existing mechanisms? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Guido, maybe you and Alex can pick on the first question on 30 by 30, please. And yeah, I will address the second question.
Thank you. That's obviously a critical issue for the discussions around the target 30 by 30. We are fully supporting of the sort of the condition under which that target can be adopted, which is the recognition of the rights of indigenous people and local communities to their lands and territories that really need to firmly integrate it in the target. And also we think that it may be useful to explore adding that third pathway that indigenous peoples, local communities are exploring as well, to recognize that third category in the target. Thank you.
Thank you for the question on the fund.
Yeah, maybe first let me go a bit further on the indigenous people rights. I actually firmly believe that the 30 by 30 is an incredible opportunity for indigenous populations and local communities to see their rights recognized. And I would like to point out to the position of COICA, which is the largest coordinating platform for indigenous populations of the Amazon, where they're actually asking for an 85% of targets for the Amazon, because they understand that this is the best opportunity for them to really be recognized within that framework. On the fund, as you heard, our position is pretty clear. Anything that could help bridge the gap, the biodiversity financing gap, is welcome, including a fund, a new fund. And so our position is very open-minded in that sense. We hear some developing countries asking for it, and we will be supporting it when it comes to the establishment of the new fund.
Thank you, Marco. I saw hands over there. Mike, please.
Sorry, maybe just one additional, pardon me, just one addition to this. But of course, as you also heard, we are really keen to see this biodiversity financing gap to be filled by a variety of instruments. So it's not going to be the one fund that will be able to deliver the whole amount, pretty sure. And so we need to see that in the context of a much broader effort and set of instruments.
Thank you. Please.
Hi. Since we seem a bit disappointed.
Your organization, please.
Yeah, sorry. My name is Celia. I'm a journalist from Barcelona working for the Public Broadcasting Corporation. And so since we seem a bit disappointed with politicians, I would like to focus on, maybe this is an argument that everybody could understand, if we could elaborate on the economic impact of nature destruction. I mean, to what extent could we absorb the lack of nature in a daily basis for food or water, all the processes that nature is doing for free?
Thank you. Marco, please. No, I didn't see. Do you have hand? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I didn't see your hand. Please.
Hi, I'm Guillermo Prudencio from the Spanish magazine Ballena Blanca. I wanted to ask you if you could give us a bit more of information about the harmful subsidies and if the parties are pushing for elimination, and well, if you have some more information about that.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Economy.
Thank you very much for that point, because I have to say this is perhaps the new dimension emerge around in the last decade. About the recognition of the material contribution of nature to our economy, which of course needs to hand in. I'm quite keen to always highlight, needs to go hand in hand with the moral and spiritual value of nature that is so strong as well. But the economic dimension has been strengthened over the last few years, and as you know, particularly economist reports like the Dinesh Gupta report, the World Economic Forum, a series of reports on the nature economy, has highlighted how our even current global economy is so much dependent on services from nature. Services that are not accounted for, are not valuated for, and therefore they are invisible in our current way of assessing economic value. So that has to change, but particularly the recognition of the risks and the dependencies of business to nature. It's something that has brought nature much higher in the corporate agenda. The Global Risk Report of the World Economic Forum over the last 3 years, for the first time, has seen biodiversity loss coming up in the top 5 of the risks to business alongside climate change. So there is no doubt that the recognition is there. Now, an agreement like this would actually help set the global direction, the global target, nature positive, ultra reverse, and the specific targets that would allow businesses, investment sector, to develop targets for their own sectors and their own companies to contribute to reverse nature loss, and as a consequence, de-risk their operations and actually create opportunities for growth. Growth that, as we heard before, a nature positive growth that will be also helping with so many other challenges that we're facing, from inequality to health, water and food security.
Thank you. We also like to have from African angle to provide that question about economy and nature. Please, Alice.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to add to Marco has said, I think earlier I talked about 70% of our people depending on nature for their livelihoods. And I think one perfect example is, of course, nature-based tourism. If you look at all the economies in Africa, nature-based tourism is the second highest foreign exchange earner, only behind remittances. So it's extremely important. And not only does the funding from tourism only support park operations, but it also supports health and education and households. So it's nature is a fundamental to our economies and livelihoods.
Thank you, Alice. For the next question about subsidies and the state play, Guido, please.
Thank you very much. Harmful subsidies are an incredibly important factor in the depletion and destruction of nature. There's various estimates of how much it is, from 500, 800 to a billion a year to 1.6 trillion a year. So these numbers indicate how large they are compared to figures that are going around about the biodiversity finance gap. And they need to be addressed. They need to be eliminated or repurposed. They fulfill certain societal goals, but they should stop harming nature. The Aichi targets had an ambition there, and that ambition has not been achieved, and there has been actually very low progress in the Aichi targets in addressing harmful incentives. The current state of play is that we don't see enough recognition that we need to increase ambition and become really serious about addressing these harmful incentives. There's no use in providing funding for biodiversity and at the same time continuing to invest in things that are negative for nature. So really, it is currently a serious challenge to up that ambition beyond what was already agreed in Aichi and what was not achieved in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Guido, and thank you, Marco and Alice. So the time for the press conference is up, so we have to concede to the next group. But the clock of negotiation is still ticking. And if you have more questions, we are behind the screen room, and we are happy to answer your question. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I will now invite the next participant to come up front, please. Thank you.